First, Tara, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Before we get into the album, I would like to jump back to the beginning. Do you remember the first album you bought with your own money?
I think the first album I bought with my money was probably Hannah Montana meets Miley Cyrus.
Okay.
It was like the first proper double CD release of the show. So yeah, that was a proud moment.
Big
but I
fan?
remember, huh?
Big fan?
Yes, I was at the time a big fan. Or I mean, I wasn't really allowed to watch any TV. And so it was kind of a special thing when I was allowed. And this was one of the highlights of my week when I was allowed to watch Hannah Montana. But I think kind of the first CD that really made a big impact on me, or the first album, was Susanne Sundfør's first album. She's a Norwegian singer. And my Norwegian uncle just sent me the CD for my, I think, 13th or 14th birthday or something like that. And that really kind of changed my perspective on what music could be.
In what way? Were you already thinking about making music yourself at that point?
I'm not quite sure how the timeline was, whether maybe I even had started to write songs. I'm not completely sure. But definitely because I had piano lessons and also had started kind of singing cover songs and then also writing my own songs around the age of 12, 13. Mm-hmm. And so I just remember that her album in particular, because her main instrument is the piano and she has this grand voice and creates super crazy soundscapes, that it just kind of blew my mind in terms of what this sound could be, just the piano and the voice. And I still find her music super inspiring.
In that time and moving forward into your teens, what did you discover about your own voice and your own playing then? Did you were you looking for a certain sound, or were you looking for certain textures at that point in time?
I think it was kind of a organic development, because when I was in my teens, I used to already write my own songs, but I was, for example, also playing quite a bit of just cover songs. And so I think that probably, without me even really studying the songs, it probably had an influence on my songwriting and my singing. And so I think that kind of through the years probably gave different inspirations and genre directions into my music. And but I never really, I never thought about me becoming a musician, and I never thought that I'd be doing this professionally. So there wasn't really something where I was trying to get a certain sound or anything like that. So it was just more of a natural development.
When did that change then? When did you kind of fall onto this path of being a musician and trying to make a living out of it?
I think I was around 16, and at the time I had actually stopped going to school because I got anxiety disorder, and so I had to quit school for about a year. And during this year, kind of a couple of months into the year, I was struggling a lot with my anxiety, and I watched a movie in the outdoor cinema called Love and Mercy, which is about the life and music of Brian Wilson, who is the producer and part of the band of the Beach Boys. And there was this one moment in the movie where he is an old man and he sits down at the piano and he kind of just plays for himself, and he's really drugged up and not doing well at all, but you can kind of feel that it's still something that really gives him a lot of strength and comfort. And somehow that moment just really made it clear for me that I also want music to be a part of my life throughout my whole life, and I want it to be a big part of what I do. And and so that kind of led to me thinking okay, if I want to be sitting at the piano when I'm an old woman, then why not also do it now? If I can try to make this something. And who knows, I thought if I don't try to make this a profession, then I know I will regret it at some point, because it is a big passion and you never know how it's going to go, but at least to give it a shot.
Right. And what I find interesting then, because in my research I read multiple times that one of the things you mentioned was that sometimes it's easier to express yourself through music than it is in real life. So was that part of it? You mentioned the anxiety. Was that part of kind of why you gravitated towards music as much as you did, because you were able to express yourself more openly or more freely?
I think so. I mean, I think that music also, you know, there's on one hand you have the lyrics, but on the other hand, especially for me as a singer, I really value the energetic release that singing can give you. You know, sometimes it's not even exactly about the words you're saying, but just about experiencing this flow of energy. And just, yeah, I think for someone like me who often, especially in the past, kind of kept a lot of things inside and maybe some things were just too difficult to kind of deal with, just having something where you really feel like you can let go and open up is I think very valuable.
You mentioned your voice and as a way of release as well, and one thing when listening to the record is you have a lot of dynamics in your voice, from very soft-spoken ways to kind of a bombastic explosion, and then you can really feel the emotion. So what was your approach, especially vocally, for this new album?
I think I just really wanted to kind of experiment with my voice, and also especially on this record, it's the first time that I'm working with my chest voice, because I don't know if you know, there's kind of like the head voice, which is more like the light, airy sound, and then there's the chest voice, which is kind of harder, stronger voice. And I never used to have a chest voice. Like growing up, I never knew that that was even something I could do. And so it was only kind of recently, a couple of years ago, that I discovered this together with a singing teacher. And I've been like training it ever since. And so on this record, I wanted to also experiment and like show this voice. And so just kind of opening up that door just let me into exploring my voice even more than I've ever done before.
Your previous album, Alchemy, was somewhat of a concept album. Do you see Værmin as a concept album as well? And what do you like about kind of having these overarching themes throughout a collection of songs?
Yeah, definitely. Værmin was also a concept album. I think I really learned to love this format with my first album. And for me, it just makes writing the songs really feel like a big project where you're like trying to interlink everything and leave hints in different songs. And yeah, it just makes it all like a lot more complex and inspiring for me to work on. And so, yeah, it's definitely the way that I've enjoyed working on music the most so far, but who knows, like in the future I might also just try to not have a concept for once. But Værmin, the concept is kind of mainly around the shadow and the persona, which is like an idea of Sigge Jung, a psychologist, and that basically what that means is like the shadow is what we learn to suppress in ourselves and like hide from the outside world, and the persona is what we present, and it can kind of variates in depending on the situation that we're in, what we feel comfortable showing of ourselves.
And obviously that is something that is made very easy in the social media world, and then kind of with new technology that we can present this image of ourselves, this perfect image, and all the less fun or uglier sides of humanity are kind of pushed to the back. So was that an inspiration as well? What kind of led to this idea?
Yeah, I think it's like you said, it's kind of something that's quite present in like this day and age of like, the persona becoming so much more present in everyday life. But also I think there's always like two sides to it, because like if you feel like you always have to be this very perfect representation of who you want to be, and you keep just suppressing and ignoring all the difficult feelings or maybe also ugly parts of yourself, eventually it will just lead to like an explosion or implosion, depending on what kind of person you are.
Sure.
And so I think it's very important to have this inner dialogue with yourself and try to be honest with yourself about all the different parts that make you the person that you are.
When did this idea of Værmin start to pop into your head?
I think it was about 2.5, 3 years ago. Actually, even before I released my first album, I started thinking about this one. And I was getting very distracted by it, so I kind of had to put it on pause for a little bit. But yeah, the concept kind of came about because the first album also had a concept based on Sigurd Jung's theories. And so that was kind of something that was already in the back of my mind and that I had read more about. And I'd read about this idea of the shadow and the persona. And so that was already kind of fascinating to me. And then I wrote Leeches I, which is the first song on the album. And I showed it to a friend and kind of talked to him about it. And while talking with him, I realized, because Leeches I is kind of sung from the perspective of someone that feels very manipulated and used in a relationship, but is also not willing to leave. And he kind of made me realize that there are always, two sides to a story of there is also the other person's perspective that somehow is also valid. And so I was kind of interested by this. And then I wrote Leeches II, which is one of the last songs on the album. And that's the other side of Leeches I. And because both of those songs had titles that were the names of creepy animals, the idea kind of came of maybe I can tell this love story between these two characters with the use of the symbolism of all these animals.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it seems to me, and this is just from listening to the album and stuff, but that the animals are Værmin and these creepy crawlers, they are very, very well suited to explain certain elements within romantic relationships. And so have you found, for instance, a spider catching somebody in their web and all those kind of symbolisms? What were discovering those and delving into kind of what all these animals by themselves do and relating that to the real world? How was that process?
Well, that, for example, was a really fun process. That was one of the elements that I really enjoy about writing a concept album, is kind of that you get to, obviously you still write personal songs that are true to you, but at the same time, for example, I knew, okay, I want to tell this love story. I know it's a toxic love story. It's not going to go well, but I kind of want to see why did it, how did it come to this point? How did it develop? And I knew that I wanted the titles and somehow also the symbols to be all these creepy crawlies. And so I just made a list of every animal I could think of that would fit this category. And yeah, and also if I then had a song and I was kind of starting to work on it, sometimes the first lyric that I had for the song already involved the animal. And sometimes it was more figuring out, okay, what animal could be representing this emotion? But yeah, then I would also watch nature documentaries or read articles and stuff about the different animals, just to get obviously, they're not very unknown animals, so we all have an idea and associations, but just to get a bit further into how I could use the characteristics for the songs.
You mentioned that there's always a bit of yourself in those songs. So how autobiographical are they? And is that always a kind of a balancing act to figure out how much of yourself you put in there, how much of yourself you reveal?
I think in general, I'm not very scared of revealing myself, or I just think it's also for me, a lot of the thrill of songwriting is kind of being brutally honest with yourself and then also actually sharing that with the world. So it's kind of an extreme process in a way. But I think for this album, and also because it is a concept album, so obviously I'm telling a story as well as writing songs from my perspective. And it's kind of to varying degrees. Some songs are a lot more autobiographical than some others. An example for one that is very close to reality is, for example, Snail I and II. But in all of the songs, there is true emotion. And sometimes, I've just over exaggerated it more, and sometimes it's more close to what I'm actually feeling.
Did you learn anything about yourself writing this album in terms of kind of how you feel about certain things? Or
Yeah, I think because this album is about facing and kind of accepting the darker or maybe the not so nice parts about yourself. For me, it was definitely also a confrontation with some of the sides of my personality that I might have not been proud of in the past. And I'm still not proud of them, but it's, it's just about being like, okay, but they still are a part of me. I will never be able to not also be this person, and to also give this side of myself a voice, and to spend hours thinking from this perspective, I think was actually quite healing for me in a way. So I think it's definitely also helped my mental development and just acceptance, self-acceptance.
Okay. And now I read about you that on the previous album, one thing you kind of like to do, I don't know if this was on purpose or not, but you live in Berlin, if I'm not mistaken, but then you went to Norway to kind of flesh out or write the album. I don't know exactly how that went. Is that something you did again to kind of go somewhere to clear your head where there aren't many distractions?
Yeah, I definitely enjoy writing. In Norway, my grandparents there have like a cabin in the woods. Okay. And I'm just there to visit my family, and we're all together, but there's kind of this little extra cabin that no one else is in. So I can just have my keyboard in there and just go whenever I kind of feel like I'm ready to write. And I really enjoy this balance of, having holidays, but doing what I love doing on the side. And then there's just less pressure and less distractions. So actually in both cases, for both my albums now, a big chunk of them was written in Norway.
Do you use your family as a soundboard? Do you test ideas on them?
Yeah, definitely. I think with nearly all of my songs, like my family are one of the first to hear everything. And often, for example, I will also ask, like, if I, throughout the process of writing, maybe I've arrived at two different options, and I will like play them both options and see which one they think works better. And so, yeah, they've been a huge help for me also creatively to just, I think it's, I really enjoy writing on my own and being like in my own bubble, but at some point you kind of need some feedback, or at least I do. And then it's good to get that from people where that they love you and they don't, they want what's best for you. So definitely they play a big part in that. Finally,
the last thing I want to talk to you about is you wrote a song. I'm not sure if you wrote it, but Du Träumst, the song for the soundtrack of Munich, The Edge of War. How did this come together, and what was your approach or vision when you first heard about the assignment or job?
Yeah, so the movie, I think I heard about it something like September of 2021. Yeah, it's all a bit confusing with all these lockdowns. Like I feel like it's like the last 2 years are one big blob, but yeah, something like that. And I knew that they wanted a song that should kind of sound a bit similar to songs from the 1930s, and that it should be in German. And so for me, it was kind of a challenge because I'd never written a song in German, and German is quite a different and difficult language to write in. Mm-hmm. For me, at least, if you want like to have more of a abstract meaning, because German can be super specific, but it's more difficult to make it very abstract. And so what I did to kind of prepare myself was just listening to music from the time. And also I read some different poets from the general time period. And then one poet I found that very much inspired me and that really kind of gave me a direction of how to use the German language for my songwriting. And his name is Georg Trakl. Okay. And what I liked was just that he had this very fantastical way of using German, very mystical. And so then I kind of inspired by him, I just wrote some different lyrics, and then I just improvised again. That's kind of usually how I do, just improvising and then narrowing down what I like and what I don't like. And then also Isabel came in, who wrote the rest of the soundtrack, and also helped a bit and gave some feedback with chords and arrangements and stuff. So yeah, but I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I think it might also be at the beginning for me of like also writing in German.
Yeah, and the visual component is an interesting one, because if a lot of movies and a lot of TV shows, if you have the right music in the right time, it can add so much more. So when you first saw the movie and kind of how they used music and including your own song, what was that like, seeing those visual images go alongside?
Yeah, super crazy. Like I saw it in the cinema a couple of weeks ago, and it was very interesting to see, especially like the one scene in the beginning of the movie where the German version is sung. I kind of knew what it was going to look like because I performed it in the scene as well. So I had an idea, but what I didn't know, like, because they had just told me, okay, the English version we want for the credits. And so I thought, okay, the movie will be over and then my song will start. But actually the way they've done it is like the last couple of like images that you see is kind of a flashback of the group of friends. And over that, my song starts playing. So it actually has a very strong connection to the images in that way. And I was also very surprised because I didn't know those images, but actually the lyrics of the song fit the images perfectly, because they're like sitting outside in the nighttime and like looking up and being together, and you can kind of really feel this, everything was still good. And the lyrics are exactly about that. It's also like in the nighttime and friends and stuff like that. So it was very, surprising also for me to see that. And I was very happy that they chose to include it.
That's very good. Tara, may I thank you for your time?
Thank you very much. And thanks for doing it, even though there were some technical difficulties.